Last night I got to see the new Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Burn, and overall, I'll say it's a pretty decent entry in the franchise. You know, it's got plenty of awesome kills, some memorable moments, and they try some new, interesting things that you haven't seen yet in the franchise, but it does still kind of follow the formula that you're used to, right? So they don't do anything too daring in this movie that's gonna like cause any kind of controversy. I don't think it's as good as Evil Dead Rise. I feel like that one managed to capture sort of the corny jokes that that were a little bit of Sam Raimi-isms, I guess I could say. And this one doesn't really go for that, at least not a whole lot. There's a little bit of a jokiness, especially with the grandma character who is not aware of what's happening around her, so there's some humor to be had there, I guess. But overall, this one, I would say, takes itself a little bit more serious than Rise did. You know, leans a little bit closer to the 2013 one. And also, this one deals with some heavy subject matter that, regarding the final girl. That, I don't know, it might make certain people uncomfortable, but, horror movies kind of try to deal with stuff like this, and this one goes for it, so your mileage may vary on how you feel about the things that it's tackling in that regard. Also, I will say that the final Deadite that the final girl's fighting, it's not, I don't know, it wasn't as threatening or as scary as I could have, maybe would have wanted it to be. Some of the other entries that we've had the final thing be a lot scarier than that. It is a cool effect, but, without spoiling it, I didn't find it as scary. It just reminded me of a certain moment from Scary Movie 2, and I'll just leave it at that. Anyways, overall, it's a pretty decent entry. It did some things that were new. They tried to actually add some lore to the franchise. They introduced this idea of a group of cultists who have been studying the Necronomicon and the Deadites, and it feels like that's setting up for future franchises or future spin-offs or something to try and maybe tie all of this lore together. Because, since the original trilogy ended, and I guess Ash vs. Evil Dead, the TV show, we've pretty much had entirely separate movies. 2013, Evil Dead Rise, and now this one. For the most part, they've all seemed entirely separate. Except this one actually tries to tie some things together, especially with Evil Dead Rise. And I'm not entirely sure if that's like a result of Sam Raimi producing these movies or exactly who's in charge, as far as trying to build an overall narrative here. But they do have some direct continuation things happening, without spoiling too much. I'll get into that later. So that's pretty cool. Also, yes, stay for the after credits. There's a mid credits and an after credits. Make sure you stay for both of those because, especially the end credit ones, kind of significant. I feel like it's going to be pretty important later. And all this to mention, we have another Evil Dead coming out next year. And that one is supposed to be a prequel set in the 70s, a prequel to the original movie. So if all of this is going to tie together, I guess that means they're going to try to make the original trilogy part of this continuity. I don't really know. Evil Dead has had very loose continuity so far, but they might be trying something here, and that can go two ways. Either it ends up being pretty cool, or it ends up just being a big disaster and it doesn't make sense. So I guess we'll find out. I'm a little cautious, but this entry as a standalone or even as a direct sequel to Rise, it's pretty good. Like you don't even had to have necessarily watched Rise to watch this one, but if you have watched it, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I know what that is. There's even actually a couple more Easter eggs, a couple moments where a certain object is found, and I'm like, oh wait, isn't that from one of the old movies? I think it is. So there's some cool Easter eggs in this one, but overall, yeah, I like this one fine enough. I don't think it's as strong as Rise, but it's decent. It's another Evil Dead. I think that's kind of what this one will be remembered as just being another one. It wasn't bad, it wasn't groundbreaking either, it was just kind of another one, which that's fine. I guess we're just gonna keep the franchise going because obviously, like I said, we have another one next year, so this is what we're doing now. Maybe once a year. I don't know if we're trying to go for that or if this was just a coincidence in the production of these two movies, but Yeah, we're just getting Evil Dead now. That's just like an annual thing. That's pretty cool. So I do want to go into a little bit of spoilers where I'm going to get more specific, where I talk about like certain things that are happening and some questions that I have. So that's your warning there. This is your warning. Spoilers. Here I go. I'm going to talk about it. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to say is that the way that they directly continue from Rise is that at the beginning of Rise, they had the people at the lake cabin where the girl like hit herself with the blades of the little drone, and that exact girl shows up again and she kills a couple people, and then she ends up starting this whole plot. Like she gets hit by a car and then she possesses some other dude, and that starts with the family funeral because now they're having a funeral for that guy that died. And so like it's directly relating to the plot of this movie, which I actually, I think that's pretty cool, because one question I've always had about Rise was like, okay, so wait, the Deadites are still out there. They're just like, you didn't actually stop this, like the cabin scene happens after the end of the movie. So, I'm glad this one picked that right back up, and now we see all of this stuff happened after that. And this one does end the mid-credits scene. It does the same thing, where there is one Deadite, the grandma, who is still out there on the highway, and she actually manages to, I guess, infect a new host of someone who's driving by. So that's going to be a line that you can continue. But more important than all of that, we have to talk about the post-credit scene, because this is the thing that I think most people are going to be talking about with this movie, the post-credit scene. Okay, it's a little confusing. Some people are, they're really bothered by this. I don't think I am, really. Basically, what they have done is that the mom from Evil Dead Rise, like the main Deadite that we're up against that whole movie, so at the end of that movie, she was fed into a wood chipper with her children, and she's just bloody mulch now, right? Like there's nothing remaining of her. But somehow in this one, we cut to the funeral home that they were at the beginning of this movie, and we have her remains in an urn, like her ashes. I don't know how they got her ashes, or how they, like, did they just pick up chunks? Did they shovel it up and burn it? I don't really know how that was accomplished, but somehow they have her ashes. And this little girl is looking at the urn, and she says her name. And the little girl looks in the mirror and sees the reflection of the mom looking back at her. And then somehow the mom is now behind her when the lights go out. And then she kills the little girl. Yeah, the mom Deadite from Evil Dead Rise comes back, is somehow in the physical world again. I don't really understand the logic there, but she's back somehow, kills the girl, and just says, "Mommy's back," So, yeah, they're bringing back the mom from Evil Dead Rise at the very end of this one. And I guess maybe they're trying to set this up as, like, I don't know if this is supposed to be our overarching, like, villain of a new trilogy, or what the plan really is. But clearly the studio or the producers or Sam Raimi or somebody wanted this actress to come back as a Deadite, and they just kind of found a way. It doesn't really make a lot of logical sense as to how this happened. We've never seen a Deadite be able to do this before, just kind of pop back up through a reflection. I don't know. There's been some weird things with Deadites in the past, but this feels, they just wanted it to happen, so they just wrote it, and then she's behind her, and then now she's back. Okay, fine. So, but that is the big thing, is that the mom is back from Evil Dead Rise. So yeah, very concretely, this is a sequel to Evil Dead Rise. Now, is Evil Dead Wrath, a prequel set in the 70s, gonna somehow connect to this? I'm not really sure. This feels almost like a setup to a different sequel, not Evil Dead Wrath. In fact, if anything, the thing that Evil Dead Wrath seems to be connecting to is the fact that they have this family's grandpa was part of that cult who studied the Necronomicon. That feels more like what is going to directly tie into Evil Dead Wrath, because that's set in the 70s, so that makes a lot of sense to me, And also, if they're going to say that that's a prequel to the original Evil Dead movies, then I guess they're gonna say maybe the professor, I forget what the professor's name was that you hear on the recordings in that original trilogy. whatever his name was. I suppose they're gonna say that he was part of this group, and then tie it together in that way. Like maybe the cabin from the original movies is gonna come back, and it's all gonna be like make sense somehow, even if it's very loosely making sense. But that appears to be the plan, at least as far as I can tell. So yeah, we have the mom Deadite back in the present day. Not sure where that's going, but that's interesting. We have the grandma who's still out there and has just possessed somebody. And Deadites are around. They're just out there alive. And we have another final girl who survived this movie. Okay, and so we had a final girl in the last movie, and then we had a final girl in the 2013 movie, and then of course somewhere out there Ash Williams is still there, right? Like he survived Ash versus Evil Dead, the TV show, I think. So I don't really know what the plan is. I don't know if they're gonna try to get some of these protagonists to do like some kind of crossover Avengers team up type moment. I don't know if that's actually what the plan is. But I think what everyone's wondering, of course, is are we ever going to get Ash Williams back? You know, like it feels like that's been teased forever, but it has yet to actually happen, you know, and every single time one of these movies comes out, and I did this with Rise, you know, I'm watching this movie and I'm like, is he going to show up at the very end of the movie? Is he going to show up in a post-credit scene? Is he going to, like, is something going to happen here? It hasn't happened yet. And so I think we're all still waiting, you know. Like I said, next year, Evil Dead Wrath takes place in the 70s. It's supposed to be a prequel, so I don't feel like Ash Williams would be there, you know, unless it's like a post-credit scene. But I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. They're clearly building something. So I guess we just have to wait and see if it all ends up making sense. Because the continuity of this franchise has been very loose, you know, like it clearly was not built to be all tied together, at least not the 2013 one and not Evil Dead Rise. Like they're all very separate things, but you know, I guess if you really wanted to, you could try to force them to make sense, you know, like it's not impossible. I can see a path where you can like force it to make sense and be like, okay, sure, I guess I'll go with it, at least if it's good. That's my other thing. It has to, you know, you have to be doing all this not just to make more movies, but like you gotta have a plan. You know, what is the plan here? Like, are you gonna get survivors from all these movies together? Is it gonna be like this epic, like, oh, we gotta take down, destroy all the Necronomicons, and now they have a sacred dagger. There's like this dagger that she has that can kill Deadites. That feels like that's gonna be important later, right? So I don't know. We're setting something up. I'm curious to see how much money this makes, if this will affect the plan. Obviously, the other movie is already probably in post-production now, so that's coming out no matter what. So I guess I'm just, we're going to wait and see what happens here. But yeah, like I said, I like this one fine. It's, you know, I don't think it's as creepy or as good as an Evil Dead as the last one was, or even the 2013 one, but it's fine. It's a fine Evil Dead movie. I don't predict anyone like coming out of this offended or acting, you know. It feels like all of our franchises have those entries where they're like, oh, this was the bad one. This is the one that ruined everything. And Evil Dead feels like one of the only franchises that has not had that happen yet. You know, and I don't think this is going to be the one either. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe even if it is just another movie that follows the formula and kind of, I wouldn't say plays it safe. Like, they do some pretty outlandish stuff in this movie. But plays it safe in the sense of like, hey, we're not shaking up the formula too much. Like, we're still kind of following the same beats. Maybe that's the trick, you know? Maybe that's how you avoid having those entries in a franchise that upsets half the fandom and causes this big controversy. You just kind of follow the same thing over and over. I don't know. But if they are trying to do this big overarching plot, continuity, like stitching all the movies together, it's a risk. It's a gamble. Hopefully it pays off. But yeah, I don't know. I'm an Evil Dead fan. I like this franchise. I just like the whole idea of the Necronomicon and these sorts of Deadite possessions, because they just feel different than normal demon possessions. You know, somehow they feel meaner, but also they inject a little bit of humor. I wish this one had a little bit more humor in it, but overall I didn't mind it. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about Evil Dead. What are your predictions as far as what they're doing here. Like they're setting something up. So I don't know. What would you guys want to see, or would you rather they stay separate and not try to do this like continuity, Marvel thing where everything has been connected this whole time? Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.